Welcome back to the 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. My name is Wayne Kimmel, managing partner of 76 Capital, the sports tech venture capital company. And as you know, on this show, I get the opportunity to interview top sports entrepreneurs, executives, and athletes who are truly shaping the overall sports landscape and just many times really changing the game. And today we have a really special guest coming live from the UK. We're going to talk sports sponsorships. We're going to talk about brands. We're going to talk about athletes with Ishveen Jolly, the CEO of Open Sponsorship. Ishveen, welcome to our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show.
Thanks for having me, Wayne.
It's so great to have you on the show. And I always love having people from all over the world on the show, really because it's one of the things about sports is it spans the world. It's a global thing. It's a really, really big thing. And as we love to talk about here on our 76 Capital Leadership Show, is that it's truly, sports is now an asset class. It's a really, really big thing all around the world. And I'd love to just start off with you, Ishveen, and to share with our listeners and our viewers about, what is Open Sponsorship and how did you create this company?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So the premise was essentially, sponsorship along with media are like the two backbones of sports when it comes to revenue. And I fell into sponsorship as a form of marketing many years ago when I started working in sports first. And I just thought, gosh, like how amazing that you as a brand can buy your way onto the field of play or buy your way into, the hearts of fans using this form of marketing, and really money can't buy experiences. But I thought deal making was ridiculously tough. It didn't really make sense to me why certain partners picked certain things. And there was like this lack of kind of data around it and tracking and et cetera, et cetera. And so a few years back, I decided, why is it not like an Airbnb or an Uber or a LinkedIn essentially of the sponsorship industry, somewhere that you can kind of go and buy rights, sell rights online, see everything out there. It's all transparent, easier to handle. And so that was kind of the premise of the company. And fast forward to now, we fortunate to say we've done it mostly in the athlete space. And so, we have over 15,000 athletes available. And I was literally on the phone to someone this morning, and they were based in Saudi. And it's like, do you have any Saudi athletes? And it's like, sure, like, let's do a quick search. Let's see which athletes have a following there and whatever else. And so, the beauty, as you said, is it's global and anyone can tap into it. And the future's really bright, where we're thinking about team and events now as well as other talent verticals.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, as you said, I mean, like this whole idea that, sports is global and you have, and one of the things I know I've, was looking at is that you truly do have, as you just mentioned, athletes from all over the world. So, share with our audience, how does it work? So if you're, let's talk maybe from this perspective of an athlete, and why would an athlete and who are some of the athletes that you have on the platform and why would they want to be part of Open Sponsorships?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, as I said, like around 15,000 athletes. About 50% are signed up through agents. So that could be as big as a CAA, a Wasserman, or an Excel, as well as smaller agents where, they've just set up a new shop and they're repping one of their best friends and maybe a couple of other guys. And then 50% is athlete direct. And I think there's a big beauty in that as well, because we're really trying to, a little bit like, you go on LinkedIn and there are jobs for, entry level 50K, and then you can find jobs that are executive level, right? That are paying a lot more. And then obviously the next level up is the headhunter executive search. And so I kind of like an R model to that, where the biggest deals, I'd love to be doing those, but we're frankly not. Like Nike does not need to use us to do their LeBron James kind of deal, whereas everyone else kind of does need us. And so essentially when you go into the platform, you can see and say, all right, show me athletes that cost less than $100, but also show me athletes that cost more than 100,000. We really cater to everyone. So I'd say one of the big reasons why people use us is because we have so much breadth on the brand side. Our biggest deal to date has been just shy of $1 million. Our smallest deals are often $50 or $100 or product only. And then on the other side for the brands, we really try to emphasize not just pro male, but like Women sports, obviously a huge growing category. College, growing as well. International, Peloton instructors. So kind of literally everything and everyone is available.
So let's go into that. You're a female athlete. You're a professional female athlete. What are some of the jobs and things that you can actually potentially sign up to go do and make some money on open sponsorship?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say a lot of it is social. And so, COVID obviously meant that appearances and in-person stuff went down. And we're seeing a little bit more. Like we're actually working on an event, I believe in the next couple of weeks. One of our clients is ABG, and they partner with Live Golf through one of their brands. And so we're doing an event in Miami and people can turn up to that. And so, there are some of those, but I'd say about like 90+% is social media based. And so there's a lot of like, hey, I want to gift you my product. It could be CBD, it could be a mattress, it could be beauty, whatever it may be, in exchange for social content, testimonials. I'd say that's a big part of what we're doing right now.
It's interesting. So like, let's, take it down even a little bit further. You talk about social, right? And so like, if it was any product, right? You meant, what would the athlete do? And like, what would be in that sort of job description if, they're going to make $100 or a couple $1,000 to post certain things? Like how easy or hard, or how is it for them to go through the whole process?
Yeah, I'd say that's like the whole point of a platform like ours, is to try and make it really easy. Because on $100 deal, let's be honest, like there's not enough margin in that for anyone to spend too much time on it, right? And so I, as the athlete, want to know right up front, how much are you paying me? What am I going to get in terms of product? And what are you asking me to do? And I don't really want to negotiate. And so our platform will ask the brand, the level of detail is like, okay, if it's Instagram, is it a story? Is it a post? Is it a reel? Because they're all essentially charged differently. And some athletes might say, sure, for a story, I'll do it, but for a reel, I won't, because that's like a lot more effort. And so we really do get very granular, because ultimately that impacts price. And as a marketplace, our job is to try and get to the close of deal as quickly as possible.
Interesting. So, when you look at, I was looking at some of the profiles of the different athletes that you have on, and there, I saw LeBron on there, Jake Paul, I saw some cricket players, I saw all sorts of different athletes on the, on your site. How do you, as an athlete, do you work with them and sort of help them so they can stand out and kind of get, so they can actually get some of the jobs and maybe get picked by a brand instead of the other way around?
Yeah, great question. So yes and no. I think we do help because we're providing tons of data to our brand side. Do we favor anyone particularly? No, I think that's like the kind of the point of the marketplace, unless it's a data-driven approach. So for example, you can go into our search and you can say, show me athletes who have been active in the last 2 weeks. So, it's like we'll give our brands the ability to find the best matches partly based on your performance with us. Like show us people who've been reviewed 5 stars and above by brands they've already worked with through us. So these kind of things really help them. But a lot of that stuff isn't necessarily to do with us, but show me athletes with more than 10% engagement rate on TikTok. So in a way, we are trying to, and I know like the MLB did this a while back, when they created this scheme of trying to get athletes to like not swear on social and post more by giving them scores. So I suppose we are trying to drive behavior by saying like these things are really important and this is what brands look at. But our job is very much to paint the picture of what's reality versus to try and shift things and like represent anyone, because that's not who we are.
So you've been, really successful in getting this up and running and having, as you said, 15,000 athletes across this, working with different agencies, and major brands and doing, $1 million deals. That's incredible. And congratulations on all that. What's been your most, exciting accomplishment so far, as you've been running open sponsorship?
Yeah, good question. I'd say on the business side, it's always when we do a deal that's a little bit different. or like a new deal, or like, when we did a deal for Chris Bryant, and that was our biggest deal. Like, that was really exciting because it's like, wow, we were able to put such a big deal through the platform. Of course, like when we did our first college deal like a year ago, that was really fun because you're on the precipice of something new. So I'd say like the deal side of things is really fun. As we, it was a couple of years ago, we did our first Walmart campaign. And now I think they're on their fifth or sixth with us. And so, being able to say that Fortune 1 is a customer of yours is pretty epic. So that's really fun as well. And then I'd say kind of personally on the business side, we raised money from a number of amazing investors, including Serena Williams. And so, of course, like that's pretty amazing to have been able to pitch her directly and convince her to write a check for us.
I wanted to ask you about that. But before we get to that, I want to ask you about your team and the people around you. And I'm sure it's not just you. I know it's not just you. Tell me about your team and what it's like to have a team of people that are together and really helping you build, your dream company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say that was one of the biggest things after our last raise was for the first time really hiring managers, because that's exactly kind of, they then become essentially more important than you because, their teams are the ones who are doing, and they're like that layer between. And so, obviously I've got my technical co-founder who's amazing, and nothing would look the way it does or work the way it does without him because I can't code at all. But other than that, like, we have a sales, like we have the revenue side of the business. So we've got a director of client services, we've got a sales manager, and their job is obviously to bring money in, which is amazingly hard, but good and interesting and a fun challenge constantly. And, as the economy goes up and down, that affects us, and just being able to ride that out with them. And then on the non-revenue side of the business, we have an amazing product manager, director of marketing, data analyst, and so operations, finance. So these people are really important because otherwise, what do we build next and how do we market ourselves and all of that good stuff.
And with your team, is everyone? I know you're based in the UK now. Where is your team based? Is it all over the world? Are you together? And how are you dealing with all that today?
Yeah, so actually we're I believe we're 26 people, of which myself plus two live in England, and everyone else is in America. And I try and work East Coast times, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but like all the American team work East Coast times. And I think remote is fine. I think time zone differences are the hardest thing because especially when you're trying to move fast, you lose quite a lot in the delays. And so that was something we realized quite quickly, which is we don't mind where you live as long as, and it does help to be in the US, just, logistically and taxes purposes and whatever else. But we need everyone to be on the same time zones. Otherwise, it's really hard to like book meetings. And so really enjoy having most of the team in the US. We do meetups. So we used to be in an office in New York. So pre-COVID, we'd never done anything remote. I'd never worked a day remote in my life. So it was a big, big shift. But in fact, there was some kind of beauty in it because you're like, well, I can actually bring on the best people to the team, regardless of where they live. And, New York is a very aggressive hiring market. It's an expensive place to live. And it's also not to the taste of everyone. And so there are some people who are like, you couldn't pay me enough to live in New York, right? And so, it's interesting to hear that. And maybe it works really well for some careers. But for us, I'm quite glad that we have when you talk about diversity of thought, there's also something about having someone who lives in Colorado or like lives in Miami and they have a different perspective. And, for example, I went to my first college football game recently and Andrew was in Philadelphia. And I remember thinking, gosh, because when I lived in America, I was there for 8 years. When you live in Manhattan, college just doesn't exist. You have no perspective on how big college is. Right. And so most expats who live in Manhattan, who've not grown up through the schooling system, have no clue what college means. And I remember thinking, like, it's so funny. If I'd lived in a place that was a more college environment, like, of course, I would have probably respected more how big of an opportunity or how big this is to the American sporting system. But living in Manhattan, you don't see that. Right. And so I like the fact that we've got people in different places for sure.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you're gonna have to. That's actually a good commercial, maybe for the Big Ten, because they talk about Rutgers as being part of the, Manhattan and New York City, and maybe it'll start to expand there, and maybe they'll start maybe get more people to go to see those games. Maybe not Rutgers, maybe a little further down in my alma mater, maybe Maryland or something like that, to really start to see what it's like, and then imagine bringing all the people from in New York down to the SEC and seeing what goes on in some of those football
Yeah.
games. I mean, it's just crazy. But that's a really interesting perspective, and I think that's something that's a lot of companies are now starting to see, where you're getting different ways of people thinking, just because of the different lifestyles they're able to live in different places today, which adds to a lot of the overall creativity and overall just how these companies will now function moving forward. So I think that's incredible. So let's get back to one of the things you mentioned earlier. I mean, you were able to bring in Serena Williams as an investor in your company. That's really incredible. Congratulations. And tell us what it was like to meet her and pitch her and eventually have her come in as an investor in your business.
Yeah, it was really lovely. I mean, obviously you sit on the other side of the table, so but the dream for any founder is to have an engaged VC pitch where you get questions back, and they're smart questions, and it's interactive. And of course, like, the chances of a yes are so slim, but you want to enjoy the pitch, right? And I think that's like really, really helpful. And so with her and her team, they were asking questions, and they kind of like understood the business, and they were passionate about the way that we think about it. And so it was just, the pitch was really enjoyable, which was so nice. And frankly, was that the first time I've pitched a woman of color? Maybe. And then even like my technical co-founder, he's Black, and so it's so nice for him to be on the pitch and seeing representation. And so I think that was also really nice, where it was almost like, oh, you understand that, like, you understand us a little bit more. And so I was just, when it came through, it all kind of just all made sense, because it's like, she is obviously passionate about the underdog, having had a sister who is just just below her, but the differential in sponsorship. So we've done deals for Venus, and the differential in value is quite high, but that's in every sport, right? The difference between Tiger and the next guy, or whoever, is quite high. And so I think that really helped her to understand it as well, like being on the tour. And yes, she knows how much she can make through sponsorship, but she can see that her fellow female tennis players are not they're not making the same amount as well.
So whether it's Venus and her team, or, I'm sorry, Venus, as Serena, you're talking about Venus, but I mean, as Serena and her team, or any of your other investors, what are some of the things that they've been able to help you with in growing your business?
Yeah, I'd say it's a combination of what can they do, and then what do they bring, and like, what do you do with that name? And so for us, I'd say we try and use our VC investors. So we have Eric Stern, David Stern's son, we have David Blitzer, and so what we try and do is also use the name to open the door, whether it's reaching out to their other portfolio companies or using it on our website. And so I think it's important. Startups always need more validation. I mean, every company needs more validation. And so I think part of it is, what can we do with the validation? And then, of course, we do ask for help, whether it's introductions, whether it's like, hey, what are you seeing in the world of sports, kind of thing. Sometimes the best thing an investor can do is just keep you honest, knowing that you have to report quarterly, knowing, as a CEO, being able to turn around to my team. And, of course, we always hope that it's a carrot approach, but sometimes a good stick approach is, hey, I have to send this out to our investors. Can we please, make sure we have a really good quarter? And so I think there's a lot of different ways that you leverage investors, some that they actually help with, and some just by having them there.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are great points. And when you mentioned, you look to some of the investors as to hearing about what's going on in the market, but from your perspective, the world, you've done something really interesting with a sort of the way things used to work. It was, the agent would go, would connect with the brand and then try to bring back that deal to a client, one of their clients. And you've really, as you said, I think it's a great analogy is, you basically made kind of like the Uber of sponsorships across the industry. And, you know, where do you see things going, from your perspective? I mean, you've used technology, you've used this marketplace to, allow, to democratize the world of sponsorships. And where's it all going?
Yeah, it's a good question. Sponsorship as an industry keeps growing. I think the point for marketplaces like ours is, where are you inserting yourself? Like, where are you adding value into the equation? Now, there's people who are doing the valuation side of things, right? Trying to essentially disrupt like a Nielsen. There's people that maybe help a little bit more in the deal management, right? So like a CRM and tools like that. And then of course, like where we're really focused on is the match and then seeing the rest of it through. And so for us, it's about figuring out like where's the white space. Now, obviously, college brought a lot of other competitors into the ecosystem, but I personally feel like college has still got a ways to go before it's like truly monetized, and there's a lot of like different regulations and stuff. So from my side, the areas of real opportunity that I see, one, it is college, ways to go there, but college. Two, I think, is the global aspect. The World Cup itself is showing you just like how global the world really is. Like, the stars coming out of there are going to be followed by Americans, even if they're not American, and they're going to be brands who want to work with them and vice versa. And so, and we've seen that like the NBA has like quietly allowed more sponsorships to be done internationally. And the MLB, again, with like its jersey patches, is following a model of soccer. And so I think the internationalization of sponsorship is going to be a huge opportunity. And then I really do like our existing pro market, but like focusing on women or focusing on the areas that have been underserved as well.
Well, you've touched on that a couple times, and I think it's a really important thing that you're doing as a company. I mean, are there any mentors that you have, or people that you kind of look up to that have really done big things and pushed things forward for female founders, CEOs, female athletes, others that you look up to or work with closely to do what you're doing today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say, so personally, one of our investors is an amazing woman called Alexandra Jung, and she was a big part of like bringing our round together. And so again, like I feel like she understood the value of a female perspective in the industry, and so that was really helpful, and helped to give introductions and all of that good stuff. So I think she's been amazing. I really respect all the people who are focusing on women's sport in the media, whether it's, like The Gist or any of those guys, because I think ultimately we need to hear about the stars more. That's how sponsorship gets driven. That's how, what are the stories behind the stories? Like the coverage of the WNBA was amazing this year. And actually, there are names there that are going to hopefully become household names. And without that, it becomes really hard. Obviously, Serena herself and the group that they're really passionate about the women's sport area. And, as a family, they've invested in NWSL teams and whatever else. And so I think there's quite a lot of people doing good in different parts, and they all need to come together essentially for sponsorship to be able to do what it wants to do.
Do you do any sponsorships across esports? I noticed that you do something with DraftKings on the sports betting side. Talk a little bit about those worlds.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, we do a little bit. I wish it was more. I'm not 100% sure why it's not more. I feel like there's always like a little bit of confusion when something first emerges. Like I was saying about college, where do the teams own the rights, or do the athletes own the rights, and will the athletes be? I remember we did a campaign with some esports athletes, and it was like their parents were representing them because they were so young, and you're a bit like, oh, what am I doing with this? And so I still think there's a lot of room to grow for esports, but again, like is esports the right way, or is it? So we do quite a lot with athletes who are gamers.
Mhm.
And so it's not true esports, but we, again, like during COVID, do you remember when the Formula One had all the race, like whoever wanted to be a driver was, and they were and they were gaming. So, version of esports now, they basically are like esports athletes, right? But they're still Formula One drivers. And so I think where we sit very nicely is the cross section of like traditional athlete plus anything else.
So if you're a brand and you want to sort of test the waters around sports, are you the platform for that?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. So yeah, I'd say yes, and the reason why is because one, I think, like one of our core values is like education, and we really want you to do it correctly, right? And so we make it very lightweight to come in and test. I think we give you a lot of support, whether it's data or account management support or whatever else, to try and get it right, because ultimately we only grow if you have a good experience and come back again and again. And so, I know one of your portfolio companies, Diamond Kinetics, is a big user of ours. And I'd like to think that the main thing being is like they're able to do things, see the results, and then double down, triple down. And that's really how we think about growth. And so I think our thought process is not like a one and done, but like how do we keep you as a client? How do we grow you as a client?
Well, I was going to mention that, and you hit on it right before I was going to talk about it. But we can talk. I mean, Diamond Kinetics uses your platform to reach baseball players, softball players, to really talk about in an authentic way their products. Is that something that you see across a lot of the brands that you work with? That this is an opportunity to really have an athlete talk in a real authentic way about their brand or their product?
Yeah, 100%. So a good chunk of our brands are endemic to the sports world or are very closely aligned with athletes. So, health and wellness, fitness, sports equipment. And the reason being is because, especially if you're a little bit smaller, you kind of want your first advocate to be as closely aligned to your product as possible. And, I remember I went to the expo of, I believe it was like the New York Marathon, and I was speaking to different brands, and they were literally saying how, oh, we know that these locker rooms use us, we know these athletes use us, but we're not in a marketing deal with them, so we can't talk about it. And if we go to the team and say, hey, Dolphins, like you're used by our coach or you're used by our players, they're like, cool, sponsorship deal, $150,000 kind of thing. And so I feel like we're kind of a little bit of a hack where if you know that you are valuable to athletes, maybe you've got like the best mattress in the world to let them sleep, or whatever it may be. If you're valuable, we're such a great way to get the advocacy from the platform.
It's a really interesting point, and so it's a great way for brands to be thinking about that. Well, look, as we start to wind down, unfortunately, I feel like I could have this conversation with you all day. I think it's amazing what you're doing with brands and athletes, and really helping them connect on your platform. But we do have to sort of wrap up here on our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. I'd love to ask one last question. Just where do you believe open sponsorship's going to be over the next couple of years? What are some of your big hopes and dreams that you're gonna that you want to achieve?
Yeah, good question. We're in 2023 planning, so very pertinent time. It might change in a few weeks' time, but for us, I think we've got a really good base. Like as I was talking about, this year we hired a lot of managers and we brought on new people who are at that level. And I think for us, it's about how do we like what's the phrase? Oil on the fire, gas on the fire.
On the fire.
Yeah. So it's like, how do we just keep growing, and slightly different verticals, right? How do we grow the athlete vertical? We just launched music. How do we ramp that up? We brought someone on to think about team events. How do we grow that? And so, ideally for us, we're looking at raising our next round, next year sometime. And so it's like, we want to be able to say like, hey, this market is good and we just need more money for here. This market's good. So it's really about slightly diversifying, but growing each individual vertical and cross-pollination, similar to what agencies do, actually.
Well, Ishveen, it's been really great having you on the show. Thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck, and hopefully that 2023 and beyond are very successful for you and your whole team. So once again, thanks for joining us on our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show.
Thanks, Wayne.
Have a great day.
You too.